Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by Shared Services Link and sponsored by Vertex. Today, we're going to be looking at the VAT Compliance Crisis. My name is Sarah Fain, and I am the Head of Content at Shared Services Link. And I'm delighted to be joined today by our expert panelists. We have Jenny Fisk, the Head of Tax Global Process Ownership at Maersk. We have Dan Jansen, the Senior Manager of Indirect Tax at Thermo Fisher Scientific, and Ellen Van Dahl, Compliance Specialist at Vertex. You, of course, have a very important role to play in today's webinar as well, and that is to make sure that you get the most out of this hour. For not on in-person events, online is the best we can do at the moment, and we want to make sure that you get the most out of this hour. So please do submit your questions while we have our experts live on the line, and we'll be taking them in about the last 10 minutes of the webinar. The best way to ask your questions is to submit them using the question functionality, which is usually over on the right-hand side of your screen. And again, we'll be taking those in about the last 10 minutes of the session. This is a very interactive session, so the slides won't be very content heavy today, but we will share them with everyone on the webinar, and the recording should be available this afternoon as well on our site, sharespace.digital. We also have a few little bonuses for you. For the rest of this year, we are giving away an Apple Watch to our lucky webinar listeners. If you're a finance or shared services or tax professional on the line today who are attending the entire webinar, be on the lookout for an email from our CEO, Susie West. Again, you must just be on the entire webinar today. Hopefully you'll be in for a chance to win. And also, we are all fortunate now to be a CPD partner. So we are offering CPD credits, again, time-stamped for the length of time you're in the webinar. And you should receive one of those from CPD about 28 days after the webinar. So let's just touch on a little bit of context for today and why we're here. It's no surprise we have seen a sea change in tax compliance changes in the last few years. The real-time reporting, compounded with the need to close the VAT gap, has created a compliance crisis that we feel indirect tax professionals can no longer manage on their own. It needs to be an enterprise-wide effort. I will leave the details to the experts, but today we are going to be exploring how staying compliant, our experts' opinion on staying compliant and the role technology plays. We're going to be looking at real-life examples from your peers on the challenges that they're facing and strategies to get procurement, IT, and the rest of finance on board. So I will be handing over, but first I just have a few poll questions. I would like to get a better sense of who is on the line with us today and some of the tools and technologies you are using. So you should see our first poll question here, and we want to understand what is the primary tool you are using for VAT reporting. Would you say that it's ERP and manual? Is it ERP and Excel? Are you using VAT reporting software? Is this something that you outsource, or do you have another solution? So we will be sharing these results to everyone on the line. So great to see about half of you voting. So if you tick the option that best matches your personal situation, I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1, and great level of engagement with about 80% of you voting, which is fantastic. So those are coming up on the screen now. And ERP and Excel seems to dominate. 47% of you have ticked that. Again, ERP and manual at 20%. About a quarter of you, 27%, are using VAT reporting software. Nobody said that everything's outsourced, and 7% have another solution. So interesting results there. I've got one more poll before I start handing over to our experts. And we just want to understand how many countries does your company or group file VAT returns. Again, we have many large enterprises, our readership. We just want to get a sense of scale here. So is it 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, or more than 10? So there seems to be a bit of a clear winner here. Again, with about 70% of you voting, which is fantastic. I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1, and lovely to see such good engagement. So that's on the screen now, and these are large enterprises on the line, and the vast majority of you, 80%, have more than 10 European countries where you file VAT returns. So thank you for that. I think that gives us some helpful context about the type of people we have on the line today. And with that, I would now like to hand over to Ellen, who's going to give a bit more context about where we are in the VAT landscape at the moment and some of the things that we need to be looking out for.
Thank you, Sarah. Good for being here. When I was preparing for today's session and getting ready with the slides, I thought of providing you a timeline and list out all of the changes that happened recently in the world of VAT compliance. Well, the first issue that I had is that I had to really narrow it down to the EMEA region. Because showing all the changes globally simply didn't fit on this slide. So it would be a horrible slide to look at. But I also realized that I just had to take out a few examples right on this slide because it would be very, very busy slide. And I think this slide here just gives you a good overview and a good set of examples of some of the changes that happened in the world of VAT compliance. So what is really happening in the world in the VAT compliance slide? If we would go to the next slide, please. The examples that I gave earlier, right, on the previous slide, were all VAT related filings, but all in different formats, different data points, different filing periods. And this is actually the issue that I hear mostly from our customers, and how to keep up to speed with all these changing filing requirements. We need help on that. And also, what is really the next change that we can expect, right? Well, what is a country introducing a SAFT report? Is it looking at real-time reporting, e-invoicing? How to stay on top of that and understand what's next, what's coming next. So on top of that, if we look at the typical VAT reporting challenges that we see, one thing is, I guess, to stay on top of all the regulatory changes, right, that I've listed here and in the second block. But what I hear mostly is also the manual errors and data quality. It's one thing to fix manual errors, right, and well, get data right for the downstream process, but the data quality step is really what I see as the first step in the tax compliance process. And there are definitely ways to automate this step, moving away from Excel that leads to all those manual errors. And I think in the next, 50 minutes, we will learn also from Jenny and from Dan on how we can solve this. So excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to today's panel.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. So I would like now to turn to our expert panel here. And the first topic we want to touch on is, how are you responding to the real-time reporting requirements? And have you had to change your processes and or technology? So Jenny, I'd love to turn to you first.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So hello, everybody. And the simple answer to this is yes, of course we have. And I think we're quite fortunate in my organisation because we're actually going through massive transformation throughout the whole business, and so that's actually given us a really good opportunity to look at the technology that we're using and how we respond to the change, and obviously this massive reduction in cycle time and the need to get things right first time. So we're looking where possible to have common frameworks for example, the actual reporting and messaging solutions. So moving away from what we've done up until now, which has been very much sort of point solutions, country by country and case by case. So now we're trying to build out a common framework which we can then configure for different requirements for different countries, but also to look at how do we improve the data quality and get things right first time at source. So what other technology do we need to sort of improve that and ensure that we have the right things embedded throughout throughout the business life cycle and the end-to-end transaction flow. So things like moving to a tax engine, trying to embed relevant tax relevant controls and checks and requirements in upstream processes, whether that's master data, the sort of P2P transaction flows and so on, and also thinking about, well, what can we do as a sort of belt and braces approach to have sort of routine exception-based post-transactional tax validations, at the point of transaction, rather than trying to leave things till the point of reporting, so that we shift from a try to fix what you can at the reporting point to actually have confidence that by the time data is flowing to tax authorities, whether that's through sort of e-invoicing or SAFT type reporting or the Spain SII kind of reporting, that we're confident that the data is there. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And of course, that it's not just a technology thing. There's a huge amount of effort required to align processes end to end. So it's not just the tax processes, it's commercial processes, the things that happen in the invoicing cycles, the vendor management side, and account to report. So it is a big effort, and there's a lot of change involved. But frankly, if you don't do it, then you're lost. So yeah. So Dan, thoughts from you?
Yeah, sure. I recognize, of course, a lot of the things that you are mentioning. We both work in a multinational, and well, in a landscape with multiple ERP, so standardization of processes and tools is always an important thing in the equation. But I think it's also important to look at it maybe from the governance side. That's also an impact that it had with us. It's important to make a distinction between the different modalities of real-time reporting that are out there. And so you can, on the one hand, you can distinguish between SAFT reporting, the standard audit file for tax, and real-time invoice reporting. The SAFT reporting that often goes a little bit deeper. It also goes into the accounting data that you need. It's logical because it's a full-fledged audit file, so it also asks for ledger details. And it can be used in a multitude of audits, not only a VAT audit. So along those lines, we also have a governance split internally. And the responsibility for SAFT rests with the in-house corporate tax department, whilst the responsibility for real-time invoice reporting is gradually shifting to the shared service center. That's simply because the real-time reporting is more closely linked to e-invoicing. In the past, there would be a decentral commercial team that would look after invoicing, but now these tasks have been centralized in a shared service center. The benefit, of course, is that they can build specialized knowledge about this topic and then look also for efficiencies and standardization opportunities. For example, when you have to buy add-ons to generate e-invoices. And again, that's simply because we operate a multitude of ERP systems. So I think what I can add to what has already been told is, it can also trigger an internal governance change. That is an important aspect to see. For me, it feels that in some of these areas, the corporate tax department is getting a little bit more remote to that e-invoicing and the real-time reporting, but more involved in the SAFT reporting. So when it comes to e-invoicing, the tax department sometimes becomes a stakeholder in a project that you used to run yourself, but it's now driven by the shared service center. That's my take on this.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks so much. I think that ties a little bit into the next question is as well, and around the technology framework. So we want to better understand. It'd be great if we could get some answers from you on how are you kind of tracking some of these changes and building a technology framework around the changes. Ellen, I'd love to loop you on this first as well, if you have any insight on what companies are doing.
Yeah, sure. Well, as said before, right, what I hear mostly from our customers is really the challenges on staying on top of these changing filing requirements and really to understand what's next. So they're really looking for one single platform from where they can do all their VAT filings and then returns from, like Jenny said, right? Not having point solutions in all the different countries, but really having one solution. Like the Vertex solution that we have is, as a company, you can really be ensured that all the updates to VAT returns and all the other new initiatives around VAT reporting are covered in that solution, right? So it is really one platform. So if one of these countries is now looking at introducing a new filing requirement, you as a company can be ensured that the Vertex platform will track all of that and updates the solution. So that you don't need to actively research all of that and update your platforms to deal with that. That is really taken care of by the Vertex solution. And I think one of the other issues that we hear, and as I said, data quality is also a very important topic, right? And we used to have that luxury of time to do month-end reconciliation and then submit all your transactions to the tax authorities. But if we look at real-time reporting initiatives, like Jenny said, your data needs to be right from that first moment onwards. So you need to have solutions that, like Vertex, right, that can automate that, and you as a business can be sure that the VAT and all your transactions is right from that first moment onwards. So yeah, that is really what I learned from our customers and where I see the most the questions comes for it. Being on top of all the compliance changes, but also get the data right from that first moment onwards.
That's great. Yeah, Jenny, would you have Jenny or Dan, any insight on how you're keeping up with this pace of change and building a technology framework?
Yeah, so we have, and we've had this for quite a long time within my organisation. We have a formal process for what we call law to report, so tracking right the way through from monitoring law change, which is within the responsibility of the tax team, and a formal way of capturing those changes. So, you know, how does it impact our business? What do we need to be concerned about? And then routing it to the relevant areas, be that technology, process, a combination of the two, or whatever it is, and actually to route it into the right teams to address that with. And we use technology actually to track that sort of backlog and the progress of it, and we actually have it built into our global compliance framework, so you know, there's actual formal monitoring of are we doing this properly and are we following it through, because otherwise, I mean, there is so much change across the world, and you know, if you're a multinational, you can drown in it, so it is really important, and yes, it's, you know, we can back it up with the things that come with some of the technology components that we use, but we very much feel that it's our responsibility to do it ourselves. But yes, we do like to leverage off the elements of our technology framework to sort of help us do that. But I think it's really critical that you have that process, and it has a proper end-to-end, so we don't just, you know, yeah, we know what the law is, but nobody's followed through where it, you know, where it actually hits, and actually have we done what we need to do on time. So I think that is really, really critical.
That's great. I really appreciate, that law to report. I think it's an important process that probably lots of companies need to work on getting right. Dan, do you have any insight you'd like to add here as well?
Yeah, I think if you look at any tax law change that needs to be implemented, most companies already have, well, some kind of a procedure in place to manage a project. Some companies even have project managers. So the sense that I have is that, well, the implementation is not always the most challenging thing, but it's just of keeping track as a tax department of all the changes that are going on. So of course, in our tax department and shared service centers, we have subscribed to many different alerts. We work with outside consultants to inform us about these legislative changes. So it's not so difficult to find information as such. It's really important that the information effectively attracts your cautious attention to follow up upon it. We all recognize that we have busy agendas and lots of tasks to do, so you really need to make sure that it doesn't get off the radar. So I think for myself, it's also important to check how you actually manage and allow technology to support your actual complex day-to-day activities. It's sometimes more like office and workflow management and prioritization of tasks, almost. So yeah, the fact that you feel that you're doing a lot doesn't mean immediately that you're getting a lot more done. So I think the office management task in our own tax job is becoming very important too, and you really can try to read into best practices about archiving items, trying to stay on top of it, these kind of things. So it's sometimes even the more not even the hardcore tech skills, but more the office management skills, just to make sure that you find all the necessary information in time and then put it into a project pipeline. That is simply something that companies already have some experience with, but yeah, keeping track of all the changes that are going on, that is one of the most challenging aspects, I think.
Well, I think thanks, Dan. And I think that leads us nicely into the next poll question that we want to ask, is that we're starting to touch on some of the big challenges that you're facing, and then we're kind of moving on to how to solve them. But we want to hear from our audience again. And we would love to hear, what do you see as your main challenge in VAT compliance? Would you say that it's around data quality? Would you say that it's the reporting timeframes or shortened, and the new now real-time reporting requirements? Is it staying on top of the changing filing requirements, or is it the volume of reports to be submitted? So yeah, great to see the engagement here. I'm seeing one clear winner come through. So it may be tricky to pick your top one here, because I know they can all be a challenge, but what would you decide is your main challenge in VAT compliance? So see some people kind of switching their answers around. But yeah, it'd be great if you could. Oh, now it's changed, another winner in the run. So we got about half of you voting. Love to get up to about 70% again. I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. And I'll be showing the results on your screen. So actually watching these come in live, it was swapping back and forth between which one was going to be the top one, between data quality and staying on top of the filing changing requirements. And they ended up coming in a dead heat. So it was a little interesting horse race to watch here. But those are the main challenges you're having. It's about the data and keeping on top of these rapidly changing requirements. The actual time frame itself and the volume seem to be kind of secondary concerns to the data and the pace of change. So really interesting to see those results. So what we'd love to do is to get into this data question now. And we know that now from what you're saying that data is key to meeting these requirements. But the struggle seems to be getting into the right place at the right time. So Jenny, I'd love to turn to you first and understand, what are you doing to help improve the quality and importantly the timeliness of data relating to the tax requirements?
Sure, yeah, and it's really interesting seeing those poll results, isn't it? Because we kind of struggle with some of that, you know, and it's easy to fall into the trap where you focus on the technology and the you know, the output, but actually if you automate, all you're doing is, and you haven't addressed the data quality point, all you're doing is speeding through the rubbish and actually potentially increasing the risk, because if you become more touchless, then you're not looking at the data, and actually you can increase your risk. So and actually that was a point that we've made quite strongly in our sort of representations through my organisation about the importance of improving the data quality and getting it right first time, and that we need to shift from you know, the situation where sort of nobody really cares, and you know, if it's not something that's on their metrics, oh well, you know, tax can fix it for themselves, because you know we don't have time, and you know, it's just completely unfeasible. And so what, you know, you're right, it is really difficult to get that message to land and to change attitudes and behaviors. And so what we've been doing really is trying to focus on getting the right leadership sponsorship of fixing at the right place, as I was saying earlier, and where does something go wrong? Where should it be? Where should something be addressed? So that's actually quite a change in mindset, because it's very easy if something's within your control, it's easy to say, well, I'll do that there, and often you have to remind yourself that no, that's not the right thing to do. It might fix the immediate problem in front of you, but it's not feasible long term. But to change the dial on that, I think that the thing that's been the most significant learning is actually trying to explain what you want and why you want it in the right business language, so in terms that people will understand. So for example, if you're talking to customer handling and customer master data and onboarding teams about why, for example, you want to have VAT registration number and that it needs to be right, then saying, well, actually, if we don't get this right and the customer doesn't get a valid VAT invoice as a consequence, your customer dispute ratio is going to go up, and that's it. So it's finding the ways that will matter to the people that you need to, where you need to either embed the change or you want to have a foot in the door to introduce your checks and controls. And I think that's, it's easy to say, but I think that is where you really need to, put your focus.
That's a great point, and that the tax team shouldn't be the one necessarily fixing things at the point of failure. And I think those are really great tips to start getting the language right at the beginning of the process. Dan, I'd love to hear your input on this as well.
Yeah, I think, well, taking a risk-based approach is an important item here. You really have to understand, okay, which legal entities have a large sales volume, which entities could be the riskiest from a value perspective, and focus on these entities first. And yeah, you have to continuously perform random data checks. So when we shifted work to the shared service centers, part of the actual VAT return preparation is a validation check. So just looking at data points out of our ERP report, additional data that we can find in other databases, and see if they tie together and if it makes sense with the business model. Now, when you have standard errors in the data points, of course you can go upstream back to your IT department or your customer order fulfillment team to get the data fixed. That is the ideal solution, but of course in practice that's not always as easy as it seems, because people are moving in a certain function. They also struggle sometimes with resources. So then you will have to try and capture these standard errors through some kind of a error management process. So we are experimenting now with Vertex's data integrity module, where you can actually correct the most common errors by actually implementing a rule in that module, so that you can stay away from continuously having to go back to other teams to change the data. Then you make yourself dependent of these teams, and that will not solve the problem, because it will simply drag on. So you have more flexibility than if you automatically change these errors yourself. But of course, the ideal way is to get the master data right. But in practice, that's sometimes simply more challenging than it looks on paper. That's my experience.
Yeah, and I think everyone on the line will agree today. I think everyone knows how important it is, but that the difficulty of getting it right. But I think there's some really helpful tips there on getting a risk-based approach as well. So what I'd like to touch on now, and I think Jenny, I really liked the examples you gave in the last question as well. But I'd love to hear a bit more about how you are successfully able to get tax into the minds of IT, procurement, and other finance teams. I love the example you kind of gave about speaking their language. So Jenny, I'd just like to turn to you again about what are you doing to get tax on the minds and get this more fixed upstream first?
Well, I have to say persistence and really kind of bugging people and just not giving up. I mean, frankly, I think this is one of the things that I feel really proud of in my organisation, is that shipping industry, everyone's like, oh, tax is just a pass through and nobody really cares, and that has changed significantly, and we are front and center of the finance part of the transformation now, and that really does. There's no clever answer to it. It is just not giving up and keeping on. And yeah, you learn things, and you know, and sometimes you get knocked back a bit. But I think, you know, as long as you can you know, continue to sort of politely and at times maybe slightly more robustly insist, and you take the time and the effort to express things in, as I said before, in their language, and align on common goals, and actually what are we trying to achieve as an organization. And it sounds very easy to say that, but actually that fundamentally all businesses are about people, and finding the right way to interact and make something matter to somebody else, you know, is really important. And yes, we've put a lot of effort into explaining, you know, sort of trying to put hard numbers around the benefits and the business case, which I think often in tax it's easy to not, or just say, oh well, it's a legal requirement, but you know, that can fall on deaf ears to a certain degree. You know, yes, you know, we will want to be compliant, but actually what does it really mean? And I think the point that Dan made in the previous question about assessing risk, and you know, like, how bad is it going to be, and what are the consequences? You know, will someone go to jail if we don't do this, or you know, how much could that hit our business? So trying to quantify things too in ways that align you know, with business goals, I think that really, yeah, that really makes a difference, because you know, as you were saying, Dan, on the last question, there's a balance between fixing things in front of you and having independence, but actually fundamentally it will persist unless you don't sort of also put effort into the fixing at source right first time, and it's time consuming to do it, but it's you know, for the long term. So yeah, just keep on going.
That's great. Dan, any tips from you on getting it into the minds of the rest of the business?
Yeah, I think, well, to my opinion, you really have to take a proactive approach on the visibility of the tax function in the organization. It's important that you really know the key contacts personally and maintain that relationship. That's the only way to have enough eyes and ears in the organization to hear about relevant projects. Of course, large organizations have a central project management office on a group level, but the smaller ones, they are handled on a divisional level. So you need to be aware of those as well. I think it's also important to focus on the opportunities that a tax project can have elsewhere. So we are always good at calculating costs, but quantifying benefits is not typically what we do, because they are subjective or it's difficult to quantify it, but they're definitely there. So if you want to, for example, introduce a tax determination engine, then it's important to also show these potential benefits for the order fulfillment teams. In some cases, they could be working with a manual instruction and an Excel sheet to apply and select some kind of a tax code, but for order fulfillment, that's simply a distraction from their efficient process. So it's not, you shouldn't only pitch it as mitigating a risk for the tax team, but also streamlining a process that is just frustrating in another place. It's also job satisfaction if you just have to manually select all that stuff. That it's not very appealing. So trying to put it in a positive note, like Jenny also said, and look at it from a holistic company perspective, that helps. And I think in large organizations, it's not enough to just give central guidance via policies and directive. You continuously have to water that plant, so to say, and you have to keep raising awareness for it. People change jobs in a large organization, so you could be dealing with other folks on an annual basis. So it's important that you have some kind of a standardized roadshow that you can roll out. You could even think about some kind of an internal, almost YouTube channel. In some organizations, you have a lot of meetings with Teams. You can record a Teams meeting, create some kind of an internal video channel to raise that awareness, and try to be creative with the new tools that you have. And it's also, to my opinion, more practical to do it that way, because if you want to present something and draw awareness, it's almost impossible to do that in a large group and find everybody's agendas aligned nowadays. We've all learned to work remote for the last 1.5 years, so we're also more accustomed to working with instruction videos, that kind of stuff. So I think, yeah, it's important to experiment in that area as well. That would be my recommendation.
Well, that's great. I think my kind of key takeaways from all this is that you need to speak the language of the business. Like you said, see the opportunities as well, and again, translate that. And it's just being proactive, persistent, and really passionate about it, which is really great to be picking up from you, and how much, it's clear that you care about this, and I'm sure everyone on the line does as well. So Dan, you mentioned some of the, automation technology as well. So we just want to do a quick poll with the audience. Have you considered using tax automation technology for real-time VAT reporting? Is this something that you're currently using? Is this something that you're currently evaluating? Does it know, but maybe you're keen to learn more? Or do you think it's not necessary for your organization? So just be great to see, get a bit of a pulse check on where you are in the tax automation technology journey. So great to see about half of you voting. So I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1, and the results will be coming up on your screen now. And a little bit of a bell curve here, but nobody said it's not needed for their organization. 17% are using it, 50% are evaluating, and 33% keen to learn more. So this is somewhere that I think a lot of companies are seeing the opportunity. So thanks so much for sharing that. We've got 2 more questions we'd like to put to our panelists before we move on to Q&A. Again, we've talked about technology now, so it'd be great to understand from, I guess, you, Dan, first, on what technology have you implemented in your organization, and where do you see any gaps? And we've also talked about ERPs a bit. I mean, how well do you think you're able to leverage your ERP? And could it potentially be enough, or is this other technology necessary?
Well, when you look at let's say the main standardization tool that we are using at the moment is Vertex's global compliance tool. When you look at the business model, we have ERP systems that have tax determination functionality. So we have buy-sell models, and for these models, the standard situations in the tax determination is already sufficient to capture the relevant scenarios. When you look at real-time reporting, the landscape is a little bit more diversified. We have different vendors that can generate the necessary e-invoice or get the information to the real-time reporting tools. But the main standardization that we've achieved at the moment is the standardization of the VAT return preparation. We introduced that when Making Tax Digital was rolled out, and that more or less coincided with us shifting work to a shared service center. So we simply needed to have a scalable solution and an API that could actually submit VAT data to the government, and we chose Vertex to partner with that. What you see is that some countries allow e-filings. In the UK and in the Netherlands and in Germany it's possible, and ideally more countries would implement that e-filing, because it would also be a bigger driver to use the global compliance tool. But yeah, it will also depend on what direction we are marching in. So likely, if you zoom out and look at everything that's going on now with the real-time reporting scenarios, it's unlikely maybe in the next 5 to 10 years that you will go down the path of having to prepare a VAT return. I think more countries will go down the route of e-filing and e-invoicing and e-reporting, and try to phase out the VAT return from that side. So you might not even enter a scenario anymore in which you will actually have to submit a VAT return. And I think France has now recently announced that 2024, they're also going to introduce e-invoicing for business-to-business transactions. So it's not in Spain and Italy anymore and in Poland, but also now the bigger countries like Germany and France are also buying into these e-invoicing models. So it will only accelerate the relevance of e-reporting and more or less steer away from the VAT return preparation, I think. And the benefit, of course, for us was also that when you use a centralized tool for VAT return preparation, you have all the data in one central repository. If you want to have a country overview, then you don't want to have to go to different departments and consolidate data from Excel sheets. And that's also one item that what we are working on with Vertex now, is to try to find some kind of a central insight module that we can perhaps build up on top of the global compliance tool. That's a gap that we would like to see addressed. So we have the data now in the compliance tool, and Vertex has a module called Indirect Tax Insights. And if that can be bolted on to the compliance module, then you can easily, then you have a dashboard module that you can use for analysis purposes. That is a gap that we at the moment really try to fill with with the help of Vertex. Maybe that's my my comment for this. Yeah.
That's great. I think with all the Vertex comments as well, Ellen, it'd be great to bring you in before Jenny on this one. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to add here?
Well, and I think what Dan said, right, moving away from that traditional VAT reporting is definitely the trend that we see, right? And that really, with that shortened reporting period, that really forces companies to use a tax engine, right, to get that data right from that first moment onwards. And then on top of that, we will probably still deal with the VAT filings for a number of years. So that is where a compliance solution is being used, right, to do that actual submission, whether that's done electronically or not. But also, as Dan mentioned, right, having that global overview is really bringing intelligence to the tax team, right, giving you that dashboard with tax specific and the data in the visualization tool, where the tax team can also use that to address the risk management issues. Also use it as a business planning tool, so that the tax professional is really empowered to optimize the performance and the insights into the tax data. And in the end, we all want to mitigate risks, right? So that's I think the powerful way when bringing in together these three separate areas: the tax engine, tax compliance, and then a dashboard on top of that.
That's great. So tax engine, what were those three things again, just to summarize there? The tax engine,
the tax engine, the compliance solution, and then the intelligence, the tax intelligence solution.
Tax intelligence. Thanks so much there. And Jenny, it'd just be great to get your thoughts on your technology landscape.
I mean, I guess I would echo to a large degree what Dan and Ellen have said. And it's interesting with our, so we're going through a new ERP finance sort of implementation now, and from a tax component, I mean, that there are a large number of solution areas that we need to address across all taxes, and obviously it's kind of difficult to do it all in one go. And so thinking about, well, what matters first, and what are the real key things to do first of all. So our first priority was to implement a tax engine. And then we're sort of building from there in terms of the, and it's driven by, frequency of reporting, legal obligations, and so on. We got very excited about the intelligence aspect, but there's no point doing intelligence until you've actually got the fundamentals there. So that's sort of driven our roadmap. And of course, with ERPs, I mean, we're a SAP house, so you can use SAP, you can make it do all sorts of things, but the question is it the right thing to do? And I think really thinking about what are the right components for the job, Because even if you look at something like so the reporting end, you can modify and customize the SAP compliance reporting module, but is it the right thing to do for your analytics? Should you be using another component? So I think just sort of trying to figure out what's the purpose of what I need, and when do I need it, and when does it make sense to do it? Because yeah, we'll all have gaps, and it's figuring out timing and when you get the best sort of bang for your buck.
Well, thanks so much. Really great answers there. So I've got the last question we're going to put to our panelists before we get to questions from our audience. They are coming in already, so if you want to put your question to the panelists, please do submit it using the question functionality. But I'd just like to put to you, Dan and Jenny, what do you think is the most important thing that tax need to be focusing on for this new changing landscape? We've got so many things coming up here, but really great to think what you think the priority is. I think, yeah, Jan, if I could turn to you first, please.
Yeah, I think 3 things if you zoom out. The first one is really like seeing that you have to run these implementations as a full-fledged project. So also that e-invoicing work and the real-time reporting, it has so much impact that it's not something that you can do on the side. So you really have to make sure that you, well, especially in a large organization, that you get it on a roadmap and make it visible. So if France starts with that e-invoicing in 2024, you really have to start now to get it on a roadmap. That's how simple it is. And focus on it as a project management take. Secondly, I think you have to be aware of the impact of applications moving into the cloud. So a software vendor is really going to determine in the near future the pace at which updates and changes are going to be made. In the old days, you had an application running on a local server in your network, and you could decide when you did an upgrade, and you went to the vendor and you said, okay, now certain stuff doesn't work and do something about it. But when everything moves into the cloud, you really have to realize that that's really a game changer. So the vendor is also, well, dictating more or less how you have to, well, implement and run your business. And that is really an insight to see. All kinds of applications will be bolted on certain software. So if that application, that Orbit application that you're running doesn't fit your business, then you really need to make sure that you see that you're using software that could, well, hamper your business structure if you don't want to adjust to that. So really the impact of the cloud, the move to the cloud is an important one to have on the radar. And I think also the potential aspect of even more abstract technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence on the tax field can be important. Think about 5 years ahead when the tax office might not even do the traditional audit, but they just come in with an algorithm and they say, okay, based on all the data points that we have, we think you should pay this kind of amount of tax. So if you then still have some kind of an entry to deliver data, then your data quality has to be even of a higher quality. But starting to understand what these algorithms can do also to your audit defense is, I think, a very important one. And there is in the world of IT something like the black box problem of an algorithm, and that might also come back to how you will have to run an audit. An algorithm works on all kinds of correlations. It doesn't immediately ping back to you a linear explanation anymore, but just a couple of statistical metrics that predict a certain amount of tax, so to say. And if you cannot really respond to that anymore, because who knows, the tax office knows your business better than you do, yeah, then it will be difficult to even to address that audit. That's, I think, the 3 topics that I would focus on.
That's great. And Jenny, your thoughts on what's most important to focus on?
Yeah, so for me, I think there are two things, and I recognise what Dan's been saying too. But fundamentally, data. It's a small world. Sorry, a small word, but it's a massive thing. And really focusing on the quality at source and putting the effort into that, and also the access to it. It's all very well existing, but can you get access to it? So I think everything that you can do to improve the right first time, preventative control, and your ability to access data, and by that I mean real world data. So not trying to sort of taxify the data, but just, is the data there for tax to consume and use, and have confidence that it's going to, what you've reported in different tax types, or the tax authority has gone in and extracted, ties up with your, what you're saying in your financial statements, your transfer pricing reporting and policies and so on. So I think really focusing on the data is critical. And secondly, in terms of technology, there are all sorts of things, and there's huge technological change, but I think the fundamental thing to bear in mind is scalability and flexibility for future proofing, whether that's changing the law, changes in your business, a combination of the two, but trying to envisage how you can build on a platform, and how things will evolve, and trying to avoid customizing where possible, because to pick up on the point that Dan made about cloud, that does decrease your ability to to sort of set things up in exactly how you want it. So putting effort into customizing is probably not a very future-proof way of going, and also it has a big maintenance burden coming with it. So trying to think about, well, how am I going to keep this going? That often has quite an influence on how you decide to solution things. So that's, for me, the two critical things: data and scalability and flexibility for future proofing.
Well, I think those are really helpful tips that we're kind of wrapping up on. So I'd love to take the questions from the audience now. Again, we've got just under 10 minutes, and we will finish promptly on the hour. So I'll squeeze in as many as I can. First question, it's actually something that Dan, you just mentioned, so I might put to you first, and then I don't know if Ellen, you want to comment as well. It's around the black box. So the question is, with the increase of automation and the risk of technology processes being black box, for example, now knowing what the program logic is doing, does the panel think that more in-depth technology audits may be adopted by tax authorities to prove that adopted solutions are fit for purpose? So Dan, just because you mentioned black box, do you want to comment on this, or Ellen, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think definitely that they will be used. Of course, it will depend on the maturity level of the IT department of a tax office, and of course there's a wide variety of change that we see across the board. But you also have very advanced authorities that definitely already work with algorithms, and you even see the first jurisprudence arising now that, let's say, if a tax audit, a tax department works with an algorithm, that the explanation of the algorithm still has to be understandable. But there's a trade-off in let's say in the use of algorithms. The more advanced it gets, the less explainable it is, because it will become purely statistics. You will have just a whole set of data points with a statistical analysis below it, and at one point there is a prediction, and that's the outcome. But that's not the traditional way we have been trained as tax folks to come to a certain result of an amount to pay. You have a quite linear model in your head. If this and this and this happens, then you have to pay a tax. But if you use an algorithm, that's going to take a much more abstract approach, and that does not fit in your linear thinking world. And that is something that you really have to realize. And it is still unclear where that is going in the near future. But that algorithms will be used by authorities. That's, I think, a fact of life that's coming. That wouldn't be any surprise, I think.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, Yeah, sorry. Just to add here real quick, I think I echo what Dan said, right? I think it's no surprise that the tax authorities have been using tools to mine through data for a number of years, right? The businesses are just later on that curve. So you should be ready for that as a business to address those audits, because with all that real-time reporting and definitely e-invoicing, it's really a lot of data that you're sending over to the tax authorities. So it is not only being ready to submit all those reports and then e-invoices, but then also, as Dan said, right, address those audits. So you really need to be ready for that.
That's great, thank you. This question, I'm not entirely sure I understand. The listener is asking about the phrase a tax data cube. So I don't know if Dan or Jenny, you have a bit more insight than I do on this, but they're asking if your organization has thought of building a dynamic tax data cube, which would be agnostic to the ever-changing requirements, i.e. enabling customized outputs. I can't say I completely understand this question, but just wondering if you can pick up on this, or maybe if they need to clarify, either Dan or Jenny.
Yeah,
Maybe I
so I
think.
mean,
Go ahead,
well,
Jenny.
well, I'll just very briefly. I think we probably haven't specifically in the cube sense. I mean, we are trying to think about a sort of the data lake or the data pool that is there. I think we're not probably sufficiently far along our journey to think, do we need a specific tax cube? But we are, because we're very much focused on at the moment about kind of real world data and access to it. But it may well be that we need to consider that. So I think you know, we don't want to look at tax data as separate from other data, but I think that's something that we need to really explore. It's it's quite a challenging area, I think. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, the same thing. The tax cube. It's another term for a business intelligence and a data warehouse, but then for taxation, of course. At the moment, we can still work in a lot of places with let's say the tax logic that comes out of an ERP system. Really building a tax cube is really a big step. You will be building connectors with a lot of applications, and in practice, it's to my opinion, often more difficult than you think. It's really a long year project typically. And you also have to defend the costs of building such a system if there's a good alternative available. So at the moment, we are not experimenting with that. Yeah, who knows in the future when you move, like we mentioned before, you move into the cloud and you will have much more data points coming out of, all kinds of corners in the organization that are not necessarily tracked anymore via tax logic, then you will have to start investigating if a tax data warehouse is something that you can build. But it will also then depend again on, the connections and the triggers all these cloud providers will allow you to make with that engine. So also there you will see the strong interaction between the functionality of a tax data warehouse and the cloud move. Maybe Ellen, something to add?
No, nothing really from my side. I think you touched up on that. So thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm conscious we're close to the hour. There are a few more questions coming in around kind of the limitations of ERPs and whether tools can handle various types of tax on the same platform. But I think I'm going to have to leave those for maybe Team Vertex to respond to post-webinar. But I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you so much, Dan, Ellen, Jenny, for a really great panel. I've learned so much, and I'm sure everyone else on the line has as well. You've all been just so lovely to work with on this webinar, and really just great to get your energy on this. Thank you to everybody who's attended the webinar today. Some excellent, really thoughtful questions and great engagement on the polls, which we love to see. So thank you so much. I do love these webinars, and I love to have all of you on here and participating. We've got a busy rest of the year with a few other ones. I do recommend the tax transformation webinar. coming up. You'll get a little survey whether you want to register for that, but we've got AI, AR, shared services as well. So thank you so much for your time today. Again, thank you to our panelists, Team Vertex, and everyone online today. We look forward to welcoming you next time. So thank you and goodbye.